Any of you guys ever wondered what it's like to be that demon that would always terrorize the white people in the Paranormal Activity movies? Well, this game is just for you. Hey everyone, David here with another review on a video game that would be probably considered to be one of the most mixed reviewed games from last year, and it's one of those games that people really did not know what it was about. All of the marketing material would just show different things one after another, and people just had no clue what this was all about. And of course I am talking about none other than Beyond Two Souls, a game written and directed by David Cage, who is responsible for what is considered to be one of the best games on the PlayStation 3 system, Heavy Rain. I have yet to play Heavy Rain, but from what I hear, it's a really excellent game. But this game, a lot of people thought that the focus for this game was a whole lot different than what Heavy Rain aimed for. And the synopsis for this game centers around a young girl named Jodie Holmes, played by Ellen Page, who has this strange supernatural entity attached to her. And basically the story really peeks into her life at different stages during her life of her trying to cope with this entity and to see just how her life unfolds. And it's pretty much a character study, just with supernatural elements attached to it. No pun intended. And what writer and director David Cage tries to do with these games, much like with Heavy Rain, is to deliver a story. Deliver a story in a much more cinematic way than what conventional video games would do. And I gotta be honest, I really liked the story for Beyond Two Souls. It's not the best written story I have ever witnessed in the video game form, but I just enjoyed it. There was a certain level of Forrest Gump type of qualities to the story, because it really goes into detail about Jodie Holmes' life being attached to this supernatural entity, and it peeks into different stages of her life, some involving her as a child, some involving her as a teenager, and then later on as an adult, and coping with this thing that is connected to her and how it affects different parts of her life. There's moments where the story treats it like a horror movie, where it's just this thing that is completely unknown to her, and because of that she's very scared, she doesn't know what to do, and so she's being treated by this doctor, Nathan Dawkins, played by Willem Dafoe. And I love that it treats it in a somewhat realistic way. They try to study it, and then lo and behold, after some time the government gets involved, because they figured, hey, if maybe she could control this thing, we could probably use it to our advantage. And to be honest, I think that's something that would happen in real life should somebody be discovered to have some sort of supernatural power. And if after some time they have noticed that they can control this thing, then we can have a secret weapon on our hands if we were to send this person overseas to, like in this game, to Somalia or to overseas in Afghanistan. I believe that aspect of that story, and then later on when things start to become a little bit more involved and convoluted, obviously she's going to want to find her own path and try to see where she belongs in this world, being attached to this thing, and see if she can help anybody with it, or if she is destined to just be cursed with this entity forever. And I love that the story explored different facets of that, and along with that, you got a really strong protagonist in Jodie Holmes. I really liked her character and sympathized with her, and I cared for what happened to her in the end. And a lot of that was really helped by Ellen Page's performance. She gives a really great performance. And not just her, but everybody else. Willem Dafoe and an awful lot of the supporting cast, they give it their all despite being a video game, which shouldn't really be an exception. I love that the cast looked at this as just another form of art. They didn't treat it like, oh, it's just some video game. No, they acted their asses off. They treated it like a movie, which, like I said, reflects upon David Cage's desire to want to tell stories in a cinematic fashion through video games. Even Aiden, the entity that is attached to Jodie, is a compelling character. I was expecting him to be that douche ghost that would just make Jodie's life a living hell, but actually he does that a couple of times, but he goes along and grows to love Jodie. After all, this thing's attached to Jodie for all of her life, so they build this bond that you get to see pieces of as the story progresses in this non-linear narrative. that I really enjoyed, and it actually made me care for Aiden. Now, as compelling as I found the story to be, there were some issues towards the end that just didn't land for me. I wasn't a huge fan of some of the story elements that they brought in towards the end of the third act, because certain things are brought in that just felt like they came out of nowhere. There's a particular mission that just doesn't fit with the tone of the rest of the story. It started to feel like a blockbuster video game that's all about shooting and explosions and stuff like that. And there's certain things that happen with a few of the characters I don't want to spoil that I just felt were quite out of character. There's nothing that happens during the remainder of the story that foreshadows this character doing this particular thing or making this complete 180 and turning into a different type of character. And these elements led to the ending kind of dragging a little bit. I mean, this thing has way more endings than Return of the King. That's not to say that the ending was bad. In fact, at the end, you're kind of given a choice between one thing or another, and I was happy with my decision, and I loved how it played out, but I just felt like it was just continuously fading out, and then fading in, fading out, and then fading in, and I'm like, is it over? It's not over. Oh, now it's over. There is a twist at the end, though, and I fully appreciated it because it made sense, and I enjoyed it. Now, one of the biggest issues that almost every critic had about this game was just that. David Cage's approach to making this feel more like a movie rather than a video game. And some people have said, and I somewhat agree, that you watch Beyond Two Souls much more than you actually play Beyond Two Souls. Which is kind of true. I mean, the first game that popped into my head after about half an hour playing this thing was The Walking Dead, the Telltale version of The Walking Dead video game, which is a bit of a point-and-click adventure, and this kind of feels this similar way. But it didn't really bother me, and for one main reason. I kind of knew it. I kind of knew that this is the kind of game that I was getting myself into because I have read reviews and watched some of those reviews as well and heard people say, yeah, it's much more of an interactive movie rather than an actual video game. And knowing that ahead of time, I wasn't really let down, but I do feel bad for the people that were when they first played this game back when it first came out. So since this story is being told like a movie, it's presented like a movie in some way, and that calls for some really great graphics on some of the human characters. They went for some of the more photorealistic graphics and design where almost every character is modeled after the actor that is playing them, including, and most especially, Ellen Page as Jodie Holmes and Willem Dafoe as Nathan Dawkins. I mean, they just look straight up like them. And you can watch all the behind the scenes videos and all that where they got the mocap suit and the cameras and everything, and they did a really great job. But I feel like Quantic Dream spent a little too much time on making the graphics on the human characters so realistic that some of the particle effects and background, or should I say surrounding graphics, kind of took a bit of a hit. Every now and then there would be some texture popping in the background when I would approach the horizon, especially during a particular mission when you're riding on horseback. And there are, like I said, some particle effects that looked a little dated. There's a certain scene where Jodie pours something into, what was it, like a pan or something. She's cooking food and she drops some food into a pan, and the food is like the most still food I've ever seen in a video game. It's just like it doesn't just pour into it; it just slides. And I'm like, oh goodness. Plus it does something that I've noticed point-and-click adventure games tend to do, The Walking Dead including, and that is that the developers never bothered to incorporate some sense of continuity when it comes to the transition from cutscene to gameplay. A good example would be that there's a moment where I have to go to bed as Jodie. And I'm at the left side of the bed, but then when I interact with the bed in order to continue the scene, the story, now I'm at the right side. And it kind of takes me out, of the immersion of what the game is trying to convey. And in my opinion, the biggest pet peeve of mine when it comes to the presentation of this game, the aspect ratio. This is supposed to be presented like a movie, so it's presented in this 2.35:1 aspect ratio. So it's supposed to look like this. Very cinematic, very movie-like. But for some reason, they did not apply some sort of setting that has the game rearrange itself to your television screen, because apparently it doesn't recognize that I'm playing this game on a standard definition television, which means that the screen on my television is a square. Standard definition means that it's a square, not a rectangle like an HD television. The game doesn't recognize that like other games do. Say for example Ni no Kuni or the Uncharted games. Those games go ahead and do the sensible thing. Rather than to compromise the actual image, it actually just resizes the HD picture, the 16:9 aspect ratio picture, to have the sides fit the sides of my screen. So there's black bars at the bottom of the top, but at least the image itself is not compromised. Everything that is within the heads-up display, or everything that is supposed to be within the image, is still there. It's not cut out, it's not tampered with, it's all still there. The only exception is that there's black bars at the bottom of the top, but it still has that cinematic feel, especially for the Uncharted games, since they're supposed to be more like a movie. Here, what do? They stretch the image to look like this. I mean, everybody looks all anorexic walking around because everything is just so squished within my screen that it took me out once again. It just messed with the image. And I tried changing the settings on the PlayStation 3. I tried to look for settings on changing the display for the game, but they don't even have that. So it looked like I was just watching a bunch of Slendermen. Now, like I said, this game plays out more like a point-and-click adventure game rather than an actual adventure game, meaning you move around, you interact with the things around you, you talk to certain people, although there's more interaction with the environment rather than actual conversations with people. And when you do have those conversations, some of the things that you say are not necessarily as important as the actual dialogue within the cutscenes. The game does give you options of what to say, but in the end I'm kind of like, okay, just say this. It didn't really matter to me that much, except for a few decisions that you were given towards the end of the game, especially the very last one, which, I'm not gonna lie, I actually thought about for like 5 minutes until I eventually looked around my room to try to see if I could find a coin, because I just couldn't decide between one thing or another, and I just wanted to leave it up to chance, but I couldn't find a coin. But unlike Telltale's Walking Dead video game, I felt like this game had a few more problems with its controls when it came to actually interacting with the environment. Numerous times throughout the game I felt like there was a bit of a delay when it came to moving Jodie around with the analog stick. I felt like whenever I made a turn she would react about like half a second later, and it would get a little frustrating at times. And sometimes the command prompts that appear on the screen during the QuickTime events, whenever I would push the button, it didn't look like it was translating very well onto the screen. Frankly, that almost didn't really matter, because that leads to my next complaint. There's almost not a very strong sense of consequence when it comes to this game and the game's difficulty. There were numerous moments where I would get hit because I would hit the incorrect prompt that was on the screen, but in the end it didn't really matter. Jodie still did what she was supposed to do at the very end, with the exception of a couple of moments towards the end of the second act where I kind of failed to meet certain prompts that appear on the screen, and because of that, that particular scene or that particular moment in the game ended in a way where I looked at it and went, I think that could have gone a different way. And it actually made me think, and I give them credit for that. And I actually kind of want to go back and look it up and see if that scene would have gone a different way. If it hadn't, then okay, I take my credit back. But if it does mean that it could have gone a different way, then good. I mean, I never said that there was no consequence whatsoever. I just mean that there's a rather huge lack thereof. But Jodie's not the only playable character in this game. You actually get to play as Aiden, the entity that is attached to her. And playing as Aiden is a load of fun. Like I said at the beginning of this review, if you ever wanted to become that demon that terrorizes people and knocks things over and freaks them out, you get to do that in this game, and that was an awful lot of fun. And it just felt very unique. And it also made for an opportunity to play this game with a friend. This game does have a co-op mode, so to speak. One player gets to play as Jodie, and then another player gets to play as Aiden. And I give the developers credit for actually taking a chance with the character of Aiden, because if they hadn't, then I would have just felt like they had missed on a great opportunity to incorporate co-op, but they did it. Overall, I really liked Beyond Two Souls. I do believe that this is one of the last few PlayStation exclusives for the PlayStation 3 before its final transitional phase to the PlayStation 4, much more like a swan song. but I still believe that The Last of Us is fitting of the title of Swan Song, because I felt like maybe Beyond Two Souls was just a tad bit too ambitious after the success of Heavy Rain, which I have yet to play. I was gonna give this game an 8, but because of those story elements that didn't really click for me at the very end, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 7, but it's a really high 7. I still recommend this game. Be sure to check it out. So let me know what you guys thought of Beyond Two Souls if you did play it, but if you haven't and you like my review and would like to purchase the game, be sure to use the link in the description below. It will really help me out a lot. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later.